This is Joseph Magi, author of Playing Card Divination and Fortune Telling, The Magi Method. You can find the book worldwide on Amazon, both Kindle and paperback versions. You can find the full color card deck on Etsy/Magi Method. You can join us on Facebook. Today, I want to examine the suspicious death of George Michael, the great singer. He died last year on December 25th, 2016, so that date is fast approaching. He was 53 years old when he died, and that's very young. I'm almost 53. I'm turning 53 in a couple of days here, actually. He was involved at the time with his lover, Fadi Fawaz. That's him on the left. And so George died in his Oxfordshire mansion, and Fadi Fawaz was staying with him over Christmas. And there's a number of suspicious things about the death of the great George Michael. And you know, George has a lot of, okay, we know who George Michael is. He has a lot of great songs. You Gotta Have Faith, Father Figure, I Want Your Sex, Careless Whispers, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, One More Try. Anyway, the story goes that this man, Fadi Fawaz, the night of George's death, George was asleep alone in his bed in his large mansion. There's 5 or more rooms in this mansion. And according to Fadi, he slept in the car. He went out partying on Christmas Eve. He's not with his lover George, who he came to stay with. He was out partying, okay, and then he slept in his car, okay. Now this is outside London, and it's Christmas Eve. And so the temperature is going to be around 33 degrees, 34 degrees, right around freezing. So unless Fadi keeps 4 heavy sleeping bags in his car, it's cold in that car. So afterwards, Fadi sent, people are like, that's ridiculous. How did you sleep in your car? Why didn't he go in the house and sleep in one of the many rooms in George's mansion? If he didn't want to sleep with George, if they were conflicting, why not just sleep in one of the other rooms? Okay, it doesn't really add up. So Fadi, he sent some tweets after this, and he said, we loved each other very much, and we were together almost 24 hours a day, and finally he managed. He tried numbers of times to kill himself many times. The only thing George wanted is to die. Okay, so this man, Fadi, just lost his lover, George Michael, and everybody loves George Michael. I'm sure you remember the outpouring of love and grief that came with the death of George Michael. I also grieved George Michael because he's a great, he was great. And then he sends another tweet. I'm not sure who that nasty close friend of George's was, but I was in relationship with George Michael till I found him dead in bed. Okay, after sending these, even more, those sound like an alibi. Okay, it just sounds like an alibi. So he got even more flack about that. And so then Fadi Fawaz claimed that his Twitter was hacked, and that he didn't tweet those death wish tweets. So a lot of strange things are going on here, and finally George's body was autopsied, and it was found that he had some sort of heart problem that is kind of a very undefined heart problem, and he had a fatty liver, which could indicate, drugs and alcohol. Okay, problems with a whole bunch of things, but especially drugs and alcohol. So he had sort of a very undefined heart condition, which is imminently treatable, okay, and he's a very wealthy man, and he's English, so they have good health care, and sort of and we know he has kind of an alcohol and a drug problem. Okay, and so later a toxicology report was released, and a toxicology report was done and not released. So I have a bunch of questions. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to do a relationship between George and this man Fadi. Okay, and George was gay. I don't know if that George was gay. Anyway, so I'm going to represent them as Jax. This is a very young, gay kind of energy. George is dead, so I'm representing him as the angel. I don't want to. I want to use kind of a bland card, so I'm using. I'm doing Fadi as strength, and so the first thing I want to look at is what was the relationship? How was the relationship between Fadi and George, or George and Fadi at the end? I mean, what was going on in the relationship? I just have a lot of questions because it's very suspicious, and people who look at this and love George think, well, gosh, something is rotten in Denmark. And so let's try to see if we can find out what really happened there with George in his death. So let's do a relationship spread first. Here's a basic relationship spread. Secrets, death. Playa. Interesting. Okay, oh, interesting. Okay, so it shows pretty good. Okay, so in a relationship spread, this is Fadi, this is George. So what's going on with George? George is the king. He's the ruler. Okay, he's the powerful man in the relationship. Cross in a relationship spread is it can be burdens. Okay, this is the cross of Jesus Christ. Okay, Jesus bore the burdens of the world, and he bore a literal cross on the Via Dolorosa. Okay, so it was very heavy. So heavy burdens. The great king. Okay, this very famous man, George Michael, this very great man, and I think it's unarguable that he's a very great man. He was very, very, very wealthy because of his greatness. He had many burdens, and 7 clubs cross is also marriage under God. Okay, so in a relationship spread, this is marriage under God. So, and a permanent relationship. George, he wanted to marry his last boyfriend, who was also a hairdresser. I don't remember his name. I don't have his name here. But he wanted to marry his last boyfriend, Kenny Goss. Okay, so George is a very private person. He was a very public figure, but he was very quiet and very private. He was a very private person. And he had a lot of trouble with the media, just like our current president does. Trump, just like our current president Donald Trump does, and George Michael called the media the devil and that they were out to get him, just like President Trump is saying, for different reasons, obviously. Anyway, so George is looking this way. He wants a long-term relationship and he wants marriage. Okay, because this is a relationship spread. This is what's going on with George. But broken chalice, the relationship is broken. Okay, there's trouble in paradise, even though and that's indicated by the fact that Fadi was out on Christmas Eve screwing around without George. They were obviously fighting. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they were fighting. So that's what's going on. Let's add this up. 13 and 7, 20, 22. And the issue is that's 6 diamonds. 22 is 6 diamonds, hand in hand. The relationship is broken because he's philandering. Fadi Fawaz is a philanderer. He's running around with lots of people. That's what the player does, and the player's in the outcome. Okay, so what's going on with Fadi? Okay, in the center of this relationship for Fadi is secrets. He's holding a lot of secrets, and he's screwing around with other men, and he's keeping it a secret from George because George will kick him to the curb. George is world famous, and he can have anybody he wants, and so he better keep it a secret. His side is absolutely awful, honestly. Scourge, Veil, Coffin. Coffin here is, the relationship is dead. Okay, he doesn't have any more feelings for George. He's keeping secrets. He doesn't have any more feelings. His feelings for George are dead. It's over for him. And it's just all conflict now. These are terrible. Fadi's side is terrible. There's no love left. George is like, I want to be in a permanent relationship with you, but you know, you're doing all kinds of terrible things to me and it's really upsetting me, but I love you very much. That's what George is saying here. Fadi's like, I just don't feel it anymore, man, and I'm just going to go with other dudes, okay? And that's what's happening. It's dead for him. He's keeping secrets, and it's just no fun anymore. It's just all conflict. Adds 14, 7 and 3 is 10, 14, 4 diamonds. 14 is 4 diamonds. So the foundation now of his side of the relationship, it's money. 4 diamonds is money, okay? Fadi, he's here for the money. And he's staying in it for the money and the gifts and the travel and the association with George Michael, which, I mean, you know, that's got to be good for his career. Okay, what's the outcome? The outcome is Olive Tree and Player. Player is playa. Okay, the player looks good, smells nice, and the player especially is he's gonna have a lot of partners, okay? So the problem here for George is that he's playing around, okay? And he was not present on Christmas Eve, okay? The night before Christmas, he's out drinking without George, okay? So the outcome of this relationship, in this relationship spread, is the deeply rooted relationship. There's a player in the deeply rooted relationship. This adds 17, which is 5 hearts, fence, sitter. Fadi is looking, it's ending. Okay, it's ending. That's what this says. So George here is very committed, but Fadi's playing around a lot, and he's keeping all of this a secret, and not very well, and it's about to end. This is about to end. That's what this says. So, a very, very bad relationship for George and Fadi at this juncture. Okay, and is that depressing for George? Yes. Yes, that's very depressing. So I want to know. Okay, so Fadi says he slept in the car. Okay, he wasn't in the house. Okay, and George is alone in his bed. I can believe that George is alone in his bed. Me and the whole rest of the world can't believe that he slept in his car. Okay, that it's too cold. Okay, it's too cold. He's not in Miami. You can't sleep in your car like you can in Miami, and it's 70 at night. Okay, he's going to need a whole bunch of sleeping bags and blankets to sleep in his car in that weather. It's just too cold. So, number one, did Fadi sleep in his car? Let's just ask, did Fadi sleep in his car that night? And or where did he sleep? I want to, maybe he slept, I think he slept in the house. Oh boy. Okay, so this is, did Fadi sleep in his car? As he says. Okay. So we have water into wine, we have mercury, we have roses. Wow. So water into wine is drinking. Mercury is Mercury's a trickster, okay? And there is a car in this. There is a car here. And then we have roses. Okay, roses is flirtation. Water into wine is wine. Okay, getting drunk, and wine and partying, and roses, flirtation, and Mercury. 12 and 8, 20. Fadi did come in his car. Okay, but he's lying about sleeping in his car. He slept at someone else's house, and he's doing the walk of shame. Okay, he was doing the walk of shame on Christmas morning back to George's residence. So he's openly philandering, and this is just killing George. Okay, roses is also a sex card. This is getting drunk. This is going out, getting drunk, and sex. Okay, so he's just openly, throwing it in George's face that, it's terrible. It's terrible. Fadi says, here's another thing. Fadi says he spent an hour trying to resuscitate George. Okay, Fadi's a hairdresser. Okay, Fadi's a hairdresser. Okay, he's not an EMT, he's not a nurse, he's not a doctor. Fadi, why are you spending an hour trying to resuscitate someone who is in medical distress? Why didn't you just dial the number and take a second, dial the number, and get some professionals there? This is frickin' George Michael, okay? We don't need you resuscitating George Michael. We need you to call 999. In England, it's 999, not 911. So, did Fadi spend an hour, he came back from his sexual exploits, rubbing it in George's face. Okay, and George loves him, and George wants a permanent relationship, but he's in this relationship with Fadi, who's just screwing everybody, especially him. So, did Fadi spend an hour trying to resuscitate George? What happened there? Let's throw 3 cards on that. No, he didn't. Wow. Okay, so cup overflowing, no, and handcuffs. Can you see that? Okay, crossroads. Handcuffs. Handcuffs is a union without feelings. Okay, Fadi's his boyfriend still, but it's ending, man. He's openly philandering against George. So no, he didn't spend an hour trying to resuscitate George. Something else is going on. He's trying to make a decision. 10 cups is an overflow of emotion. This is feeling just very emotional about it. And so he didn't spend an hour. Let's ask one last question. Did Fadi contribute to the death? Did Fadi intentionally contribute to the death of George Michael? Okay, the untimely death of George Michael. And, George had a rough life. We all remember when he was caught in Beverly Hills for publicly soliciting sex. I mean, that's kind of how he came out as gay. In 2007, he lost his driver's license. In 2008, he was arrested for drug possession. In 2009, he broke up with his lover, Kenny Goss, who he wanted to marry. He didn't tell anybody. He didn't make that public until 2011. George was pretty upset about that. In 2010, George crashed into a shop with his Range Rover, and he was on drugs and alcohol. In 2013, at 70 miles an hour, George, quote unquote, fell out of the passenger seat into traffic at 70 miles an hour and spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Was that a suicide attempt? George had a real rough life. So, and I think it's because he's a very sensitive, very private individual who lived a very public life because he was a superstar. So did Fadi Fawaz intentionally contribute to the death of George Michael? Oh my God. Okay, so we got executioner, we got four-leaf clover, we've got player. This is 2428. Adds secrets. Oh my God. Executioner is the murderer card. Okay, the executioner acts without consulting anybody. The player takes advantage of situations and is not an emotional person. The four-leaf clover is it's very opportunistic. It takes advantage of opportunities as they arise. Okay, and seven spades. This adds 28 seven spades. Secrets. I'm going to conclude that Fadi Fawaz, the player, this man, Fadi Fawaz, he found George unconscious in the bed, and he hemmed and hawed about it for an hour. And that's why he did tell the truth about the 1 hour. Okay, here's George in medical distress, unconscious, probably in a coma, and he spent an hour trying to figure out if he should just let him die or save him. And so the question I asked here is, did he contribute intentionally to the death of George Michael? And the answer is yes, he did. The executioner did. He intentionally took advantage of this situation. He delayed calling medical. So he's partly responsible for George Michael's death. The relationship between them was so bad, he was about to lose all this money and notoriety and all the gifts and the travel that come with, being the lover of George Michael. And this is a classic case of, if I can't have you, no one else can. He didn't kill him, okay, but we have the executioner card here. The executioner is the murderer card, okay? He took advantage of the circumstances, and he acted without feeling. The executioner has absolutely no feelings. The player is not acting with feelings. This is somebody who wants something. Terrible. Okay, so my conclusion regarding, let's back up here. So to sum it up, okay, the relationship spread showed that George and Fadi, the relationship was over for Fadi. Okay, emotionally, it was over. And he was just openly screwing around on George. And George was devastated by it. George wanted a permanent relationship. He's a very sensitive, emotional man, which is what makes him so great, which is what makes him a great artist. God love George Michael. So that's what the relationship spread said. Did Fadi Fawaz sleep in his car as he said? No. Fadi Fawaz was coming back. He slept at a lover's house, and he was coming back. He's lying. In the middle was Mercury, a trickster, a liar. He slept at a lover's house. He had sex with another man that night on Christmas Eve. This is devastating to George. Did Fadi Fawaz contribute actively to the death of George Michael? Yes. He's telling the truth about waiting an hour. Okay, he said he was trying to resuscitate George for an hour. So he's telling the truth about that 1 hour because he figured they could figure it out. Okay, but he's lying about trying to resuscitate him. He was hemming and hawing, deciding whether or not he wanted to save George Michael, and whether or not he just wanted to leave the premises and say, I was never here. Okay, so he took advantage of the situation, and it resulted in the death of George Michael. Very, very sad. Very sad. Okay, and these tweets that Fadi Fawaz sent, these, we loved each other very much. George tried a number of times to kill himself, many times. The only thing George wanted is to die. Those tweets, he was not hacked. Those tweets are an alibi. Fadi Fawaz was making up an alibi. Fadi Fawaz did contribute to the death of George Michael. And it was just, anyway, that makes me very sad. Anyway, that's how I see it. I'm Joseph Magi, author of Playing Card Divination and Fortune Telling, the Magi Method. You can find the book worldwide on Amazon, both Kindle and paperback versions. You can find the full color card deck on Etsy/Magi Method. You can join us on Facebook.